people call porn addiction, it just feels massive and incredibly polarized right now.
Totally. On one side, you have these really serious claims, backed by neuroimaging, suggesting genuine physical brain changes.
Yeah, things that mirror substance abuse and lead to real-world performance issues.
And then on the other side, you've got this equally fierce skepticism, people arguing that, no, this isn't an addiction at all. It's really more of a profound moral or religious conflict that's just disguised as a clinical disorder.
Right, so the symptoms, the anxiety, the guilt, they're real, but the cause might be culture, not chemistry.
Exactly.
So we've got a stack of really complex research to get into for you today. We're talking fMRI and FNRS brain studies, detailed clinical reports from urologists, and these large-scale meta-analyses on couples and moral conflict.
And our mission here is really to synthesize these wildly different perspectives. You've got the hard neurobiological argument, the strong psychological counter-argument, and of course the crucial relational impact.
We want to give you a clear, nuanced understanding of what's actually happening here. So we're going to go deep into the brain, the clinic, and the human element.
Sounds good.
Let's start with the foundational claim of the addiction camp, the brain chemistry. Researchers often use this concept of the supernormal stimulus when they talk about internet pornography, or IP.
Right, and it's important to say we are not talking about a magazine here.
No.
The brain evolves to chase a biological reward, right? A sexual reward. But IP, because of the internet, has become what they call a supernormal stimulus. It's an exaggerated, almost overstimulating imitation of that original reward.
So what makes it so potent then?
Well, it's kind of a trifecta. You've got high-definition video, the promise of limitless novelty, and the easy potential for escalation to more extreme material. Research is clear that the video format is just significantly more arousing.
And that intense arousal is critical because, well, sexual motivation is regulated by the brain's mesolimbic dopamine pathway, right?
Exactly, the VTA-NAC circuit. You can just think of it as the brain's motivation and reward highway. And things like novelty, the anticipation of a reward, even just the act of seeking or surfing for new content, all of that triggers these significant dopamine bursts in that system.
And this is where the neurobiological findings get, really interesting because they seem to point to two contradictory things happening at the same time.
Yeah, it's like hitting the gas and the brake simultaneously.
So let's tackle the gas first, this idea of hyperactivity or sensitization.
Okay, so what we see is that compulsive IP users develop this enhanced cue reactivity. When they're exposed to explicit material or even just cues related to it, specific brain regions light up.
Which regions are we talking about?
Well, the craving engine, like the ventral striatum, the emotional alert center, which is the amygdala, and the conflict monitor, the DACC, they just fire up with activity that looks incredibly similar to drug craving in substance abusers.
And this sensitization is key. It leads to increased wanting, so the craving for it, but not necessarily increased liking or the actual pleasure from it.
That's it. The chase becomes the reward, even if the catch is kind of underwhelming. That's the core addiction model right there. You're not pursuing pleasure anymore. You're just pursuing relief from the craving.
Okay, so if that's the gas pedal, what about the brake? The hypoactivity or tolerance?
So with prolonged high-frequency use, we start seeing actual structural changes. Researchers found a smaller right caudate nucleus in heavy users.
And why should we care about that specific part of the brain? What does that do?
It's a region that's critically involved in sustained romantic love and attachment.
Wow.
So frequent IP use isn't just changing the reward system. It appears to be structurally, prioritizing novelty over the neural structures that support deep relational connection.
That is genuinely a terrifying implication. You could be rewiring the part of your brain responsible for attachment.
And we also see lower functional connectivity between the striatum and the prefrontal cortex.
Which is the part for executive function, for self-control.
Exactly. Inhibitory control. All this suggests a downregulation of the natural neural response to sexual stimuli. You just need more input, more novelty, more extreme content to get to a baseline level of arousal.
True.
The brain is adapting.
It's adapting to this supernormal environment. So if the brain is doing all this, what are the real-world clinical consequences?
Well, one finding that just jumps out is the sharp recent rise in sexual difficulties in young men, the kind of thing that traditional risk factors like health or aging, they just can't explain it.
What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Historically, rates of erectile dysfunction, ED, were pretty low in men under 40, but today the rates are frankly shocking. Recent studies show ED in young men like 18 to 40, ranging from 14% all the way up to 30%.
That's a huge change.
It's a very sudden and significant public health change.
And the mechanism linking IP use to this is something called the conditioning hypothesis. Clinicians call it PIED, right? Pornography-induced erectile dysfunction.
Yeah, and it's a classic case of conditioned response. It's almost like Pavlov's dogs. If a man spends years experiencing intense sexual arousal that's conditioned to these very specific non-partner cues.
Like the novelty, the fast cuts, the voyeuristic camera angle.
Exactly. Then partnered sex might just fail to meet those intense conditioned expectations.
The bar has been set way too high by the digital world.
Precisely. And when that expectation isn't met in the real world, the natural dopamine response declines, and that leads to tangible performance issues. ED, difficulty climaxing with a partner, things like that.
Is there any good news there?
There is. Intervention studies are really suggestive. It seems that simply stopping high-frequency IP use can often reverse the ED and arousal problems. The conditioning can be undone.
Which is why that simple diagnostic protocol from clinicians is so useful.
Yeah, just ask. Can the patient achieve a satisfactory erection or climax when masturbating without using IP? If the answer is no, but they can with it, then the dysfunction is likely conditioned to the screen. It's not a general physical issue.
Okay, so moving beyond physical function, let's talk about focus, this idea of a cognitive fallout.
Right. There are recent studies using FNIRS, which is functional near-infrared spectroscopy. It's just a way to see active brain parts using light, and they show what happens to attention immediately after viewing.
And they used the Stroop test for this, didn't they?
They did, which is a great measure of cognitive interference. You know, the one you see the word RAD, but it's printed in blue ink, and your brain has to fight itself to just name the color.
Right, ignore the word.
And the results were really clear. High-frequency viewers showed significantly reduced accuracy and longer reaction times on that test after watching pornography.
Compared to low-frequency viewers and even their own baseline performance.
Yes. So high-frequency viewing seems to cause this measurable short-term cognitive decline. It's linked to this hyperactive functional connectivity in the prefrontal cortex.
The part of your brain for executive function and stopping yourself from doing things. Inhibitory control.
Exactly. So all of these findings, they make a pretty strong case for brain alteration and real-world consequences, mirroring classic addiction models.
Okay, but here is the massive pivot. If the neurobiology looks so much like substance abuse, why are so many prominent researchers and clinicians so hesitant to just label this a pure addiction? Why is there so much conflict?
Because for a huge segment of people who report having a problem with pornography, the actual amount they use is secondary.
So it's not about the frequency.
Not primarily. The most powerful predictor of feeling distress, guilt, and a loss of control is something called moral incongruence.
And this is the core finding from the big psychological meta-analyses. So what is moral incongruence?
It's this crushing internal conflict. It's felt by people who use porn, but deep down believe it's morally wrong or destructive or against their core values. Often this stems from religious or sexual conservative upbringings.
And this creates a shame and guilt cycle.
A devastating, self-perpetuating one. The distress, the anxiety, the guilt, the depression, that is what they interpret as a sign of an all-consuming chemical addiction. They're diagnosing themselves based on their emotional reaction to violating their own moral code.
And the evidence for this is strong.
It's robust. Religiosity is a very powerful predictor of moral incongruence. And crucially, one study found that porn use only predicted depression in men who disapproved of porn in the first place.
Wow. So for men who had no moral issue with it.
Frequency didn't correlate with depression at all. It's the moral conflict that seems to be causing the harm, not necessarily the behavior itself.
Which is why the diagnostic manuals get so tricky. The DSM-5, the one used in the U.S., has been pretty cautious. It hasn't classified IP addiction yet.
Right. Although it did put internet gaming disorder in its section for conditions for further study.
But the global standard, the ICD-11 from the World Health Organization, it does list compulsive sexual behavior disorder, or CSBD.
It does, but, and this is a crucial caveat, the ICD-11 recommends excluding cases where the primary distress is due to moral judgment or religious disapproval.
So that's an international recognition that symptoms driven by guilt, even if they're severe, aren't necessarily signs of a primary behavioral disorder.
Exactly. It's a different kind of problem. And that differentiation is vital because treating moral distress like chemical dependency is probably not going to resolve the underlying conflict.
Which leads us to the final area of complexity here, how all of this plays out in committed relationships.
Right. Shifting our focus, there's a theory called symbolic interaction theory, which suggests that the meaning a couple assigns to pornography use matters far more than the action itself.
So if both partners see it as normal and healthy, the outcome is totally different than if one sees it as a betrayal.
Precisely. And this is where something called pornography acceptance acts as a powerful moderator of relationship satisfaction.
Okay, so how does that work?
Yeah. The research on couples is fascinating. For men who are more accepting of pornography use, greater use is actually associated with higher relationship satisfaction.
Wait, higher.
Higher. They have harmony between their behavior and their values, and presumably their partner is on the same page.
But obviously the reverse has to be true for men who are less accepting.
More use is associated with less relationship satisfaction. They're carrying that internal conflict right into the relationship.
And then you throw personality traits into the mix.
Yeah.
Specifically, anxious attachment.
Yes, and this trait, which is characterized by a real fear of abandonment and a constant need for closeness, creates this paradoxical gender split when it comes to porn use.
Okay, this sounds counterintuitive. For anxiously attached men, more porn use is associated with higher relationship satisfaction.
I know it's completely counterintuitive. The hypothesis is that IP might function as a kind of secure fantasy attachment for them. It might bolster their sense of masculinity or ease their insecurities without the risk of emotional rejection they fear in the real world.
Wow. Whereas for anxiously attached women, it's the complete opposite.
The complete opposite. Increased IP use by their partner is associated with significantly less relationship satisfaction. They are far more likely to see their partner's use as a direct threat, a precursor to infidelity, or a sign of emotional withdrawal. It leads to intense pornography distress.
So what does all this complexity mean for you, the listener, or for a therapist trying to help a couple?
It means the impact of use hinges so heavily on individual moral attitudes and relationship dynamics. You have to assess both partners' acceptance of pornography and their attachment styles. You have to encourage open, transparent communication about sexual values and ground rules.
We've covered a huge amount of ground today. You've seen, very strong evidence for neurobiological changes, dopamine sensitization, decreased natural reward sensitivity, even reduced short-term cognition. It all certainly mimics substance abuse pathways.
And it correlates with real sexual dysfunction in young men. But we've also seen equally strong psychological evidence that for many, this self-perceived addiction is overwhelmingly driven by moral conflict, guilt, and religious background.
So the distress itself is the primary clinical problem, not just how often they use it.
We're left with this powerful tension between what the brain seems to be doing and what the user believes is happening.
And that belief, as we've established, can cause measurable psychological harm all on its own.
So considering the ICD-11's guidance to exclude moral conflict as the source of distress, and the finding that the belief that IP is inherently addictive causes so much psychological pain, we have to ask a final question.
Okay.
Are the psychological problems that some individuals experience actually being exacerbated or maybe even generated by the widespread social and cultural narrative that internet pornography is inherently destructive and addictive rather than the content or the neurochemistry itself? If the narrative is what's creating the distress, then maybe we need to address the narrative. That's something worth exploring further.